Well, Mike, yesterday really haven't finished week one yet because we have games today and tomorrow, but I'm still confused because we played last week, but it was week zero. I'm still confused about what week zero is. But anyway, uh, kind of had the first games last week or this week ranked on ranked teams. One, Cincinnati and Arkansas, which yeah, I think that's a better game. At the end of the year, we're going to look back and say that's a better game than we thought it was because Cincinnati lost several key players last year to that team that busted the window and got us to the new playoff format, which we'll talk about later. They had to travel to SEC country down to Fayetteville, Arkansas. Sam Pittman's got it going in Fayetteville. I like exactly what he's doing down there. And listen, we're going to look back end of the season and say those were two good football teams.
I think so. And the odds makers got that game right. They opened at Arkansas -7.5. It closed at 6.5 or 7. And of course, it lands right on 7. But the stat line was very even. Cincinnati's total yards were 436. The Hogs had 447. And Cincinnati actually had 24 first downs to Arkansas's 23. But Arkansas was a little more physical. You could notice it was very noticeable the lack of physicality on that Cincinnati front that they had last year.
And of course, Arkansas, they have to open SEC play this coming week against South Carolina, and I think we'll get a better idea of just how physical Arkansas is. They're always going to be physical. They're going to be physical under Sam Pittman. We've got to find out if they've got the horses up front to play physical throughout the entire SEC season. Utah and Florida, we talked about that game. Of course, you and I, we're both big on the Utes. We like those guys, like the way they play, like the way they travel. And they went into the swamp, and Billy Napier got his first win, but it was not easy at all.
No, it wasn't. And from a bettor standpoint, this game was more like the Price is Right version of Plinko. It was wherever the ball bounced, and it was – you didn't have a right side or a wrong side. Florida ended up, with the win, and they got that big stop. But there was a lot of lucky and bad luck bounces for both teams, including number 7 for the Gators. He's running down the field. He drops the ball, and it bounces directly back up to him, which, but it was a good opening win for the Gators. And, that late stop, I'm not going to question Whittingham there for throwing it because you want to go for the win, but that was a tough way to lose. That game probably should have gone to overtime.
Well, no, it really shouldn't have gone to overtime because if Kyle Whittingham had earned his money, and we've talked about this a million times over the years, is that when the NCAA in 1996 instituted overtime, and once they instituted overtime, those 2-point cards, they should be banned from coaches using those. And, I've told you a million times, you never go for 2 until you get into the fourth quarter, right? Utah scores late in the third quarter. He goes for 2. He misses it. Now, Florida scores with about 12 minutes to go in the fourth quarter, and it benefits Napier then to go for 2, whether he makes it or not. He makes it, okay? Now, but think about this. And he would have gone to 2. He would have gone for 2 in that situation, regardless what Utah had done. But if Utah kicks the extra point instead of trying to go for 2, then they've got a field goal to win the game. They're not even throwing it in the end zone at that point.
Yeah, you're right. And this weekend has done nothing but solidify my belief that there's maybe 1 or 2 coaches that know how to manage a game. They all can coach X's and O's. They all can recruit, to some level. But we can go back. We could do a whole show on Brom and Purdue and, Scott Frost. Look, I catch grief because I thought Scott Frost was the perfect fit at Nebraska. I don't know if he's a perfect fit at Belmont, if they even play football.
Yeah.
Just because he won in dominant fashion at Central Florida, he gets to Nebraska and makes those kind of plays. But anyway, that's in the past. But one thing about this game is the odds makers opened Florida as a favorite. The public bet Utah to a favorite. This also happened with North Carolina and App State, I don't ever like being on the side of the public when it goes across zero. When the odds makers make one team a favorite and then the public makes, even if it's solid injury information, I don't like that. This was another case. Actually, the North Carolina one as well. Another case there. Utah, they're still the favorite to win the Pac-12, but a lot of my colleagues that had Utah to win it all and go to the college football playoff, they're in a tough position because they've already got that loss. And if there's a number 2 team from the SEC that they're being graded against, they're going to be out.
Well, the top 3 yesterday, they were in action. All 3 won. Of course, Alabama handled Utah State handily, as they should have. The other 2 games that were ranked teams that were going with number 2 and number 3, Ohio State and Notre Dame. Notre Dame going into the Horseshoe. Marcus Freeman returning to his college roots. He had some comments earlier during the summer that didn't sit well in Columbus about their academic requirements at Ohio State versus Notre Dame. But again, they go in. These were 2 teams that I thought would slug it out. I kind of liked the game because it was a defensive affair. Overall, though, I can understand from just a regular fan watching the game, it was kind of a boring game. But I saw some things defensively that I liked. The one thing that with me, Ohio State was just able to wear Notre Dame down after a while, and Irish just couldn't keep up with them. And as we saw that by the second half.
Yeah, it didn't meet expectations as far as ABC and the general fan was. Ohio State plays a lot of games that are high scoring, but when they get into games against Penn State or a good Notre Dame team, they do tend to sometimes they get ugly. Yesterday's game was ugly. I mean, Notre Dame led 10-7 at half, but they only managed 12 first downs for the entire game, only 253 yards for the entire game. And frankly, it was, a boring game. I don't think Stroud killed his chances for Heisman, but he didn't look all that great. And a lot of credit has to go to Notre Dame there.
Yeah, Notre Dame offensively, if they're going to be competitive, they've got to step it up. And we've seen that when they've had a chance to go into the playoffs. They can hang for just a little while, but their offense is nowhere near up to their defense. And they've got to improve defensively. Even under Brian Kelly, even with marquee names, they just never really had what you could consider a dominant offense to go along with a very capable defense. Now, speaking of capable defenses, I think we saw one yesterday afternoon in Atlanta with Georgia and Oregon. Poor Bo Nix, a lot of this is going to be laid at his feet. But listen, I don't care. You could have dug up, Lynn Dawson, Bart Starr, tapped in with Joe Namath and Joe Montana. I don't even know how the collective would do against this Georgia defense. They're pretty salty.
Well, Coach, look, they lost 15 players to the NFL. Another 13 transferred out, probably, for various reasons, but some of which is because they have so much talent, they're not going to get on the field. They'll be starting somewhere else, just like Justin Fields did. He went to Ohio State. Now he's in the NFL. He's got tons and loads of talent there. And the point spread on this game went from 18 to 17 to 16. I kind of leaned to Oregon to make make it close. And it was just a beatdown. And it wasn't, it wasn't a situation. In the years past, the Oregon teams, they would snowball teams with their offense and sonic speed. This Georgia team, they snowball teams. They don't even try to run it up. They can't help it because they're so dominant physically on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, this is a complete football team. Kirby Smart, he's done in Athens exactly what they expected him to do when they hired him away from Tuscaloosa. And I have to give him props yesterday, because when they were talking about the game and was asking him, about the score and that type of thing, he said, Dan Lanning, he's going to do a fine job in Oregon. He's going to get where he needs to be. He said, but we just have better players right now. And, you don't hear coaches talk that honestly, very often. But they do. They just have better players right now.
Well, that's why, when we did several shows in the preseason, we talked about, it's the Alabama, Clemson's, it's the same teams in the playoff. And it's because they have the better players. And then they play against other teams in their conference that have better players. And then when they get there, that's why Oklahoma and Notre Dame, they're elite programs, but they're 0-6 in the playoff, and they're good teams. But they're
They
not.
are.
But they're not at that super elite level like Georgia, Clemson, and Alabama have been.
No, and now think about this with the new playoff format that's been proposed. I think we're probably going to see less of these games because theoretically, if that were in place this year, you could see Oregon and Georgia meeting again in the playoffs. If Oregon were to win the Pac-12, there's a very good possibility you're going to see a rematch in the playoffs.
Well, but you think we'll see less scheduled games like the Oregon Georgia? I think we would see more because remember we didn't see Nick Saban would take his team and play Michigan, USC, Clemson right out of the gate, some neutral site for 12 years in a row. Well, I don't think you didn't see that before that because you had only the BCS. Then they went to 4. It gave you a little wiggle room. So are you thinking that it's going to eliminate some of those games?
Well, this is why I think it would eliminate the games. I can see the argument, obviously, for having more of these games. The reason I think that it will eliminate some of these games is because of the automatic bids that are going to the conference champions. I think they're going to be looking at playing more conference games. And so I think the more conference games you play, instead of Georgia being able to play Oregon in a contest like this, then you're going to tack in maybe a Texas A&M, something like that. So I think it'll still be good games. I think it'll just won't be the cross-country type games that we've been seeing. I think you'll see more of the in-conference battles. But again, when you look at that scenario, you're only talking about really the SEC and the Big Ten. The Pac-12 from top to bottom, they're as weak as you can be.
Yeah, and the first thing when I saw the headlines about the 12-team playoff is how eerily similar that was to your proposal 7 years ago when we were on the air.
Yeah, it was a savant, I'm telling you.
Well, did you finally get your request put into the names that the higher ups that matter?
All those years of writing letters and sending emails and dirty phone messages has finally made us smart. But hey, really, all this is as we've talked many times before. As someone who has spent time at every level of college football, from NAIA all the way up to Division I mean, if 1AA could do it, or the FCS as we call them now, Division II, Division III, and NAI can do it, the big boys can do it. And you know why the big boys are doing it now is because it's just more and more money. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. But at least, and it may start as soon as 25, they said.
Yeah, it could. And listen, if they can figure out a way to make it happen sooner, to get the checks rolling in sooner, they'll get that done.
Yep. And I'll be glad to see it.
Me too. All right, listen, appreciate you taking time with us. Know Sunday's a busy day for you with everything that you've got going on, but we'll appreciate it. And we'll see you later on this week on both Morning Blitz and on Inside the Numbers.
Thanks, Coach.